Well, we were very disappointed that we had developed these tax programs for research and innovation. And it's been very disappointing. The film industry lost money yesterday. High-tech industry lost money yesterday. Educational institutions lost money yesterday. So that means that people living on the lowest amount of income in this province are now paying for major corporations to get extra money for them. The mayors have told us that's going to increase property taxes because they've also increased the provincial government's portion of your city tax is the education tax. Well, I think government plays a very important role in society, but I don't think it's the only way that we make our society better. Well, yesterday's budget is not a job creation budget. It's a reduction in services budget. That's all it's about.
Hello, good afternoon, सत श्री अकाल, नमस्कार। मैं इंद्रनील चौधरी आप सबको स्वागत करता हूं स्टार कनाडा की तरफ से। हमारे साथ आज एक स्पेशल गेस्ट हैं MLA Richard Feehan from Edmonton Rutherford. So we are going to get to know him more in person, his personal front. We know him as a politician quite a bit, and we will delve upon the very, very important burning issue right now. A few hours ago, the budget was announced. So what he thinks from the perspective view of the opposition, official opposition, and his take on the budget, and then we'll go to our very favorite buzzer round. So MLA Richard Feehan, you're welcome to Star Canada Show.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing today?
Very good. A little bit disappointed about yesterday's news around the budget, but I'm always hopeful and working hard for the community. So,
as always, thank you very much for taking out some time and talking to us today. And your message will be going to thousands of people through Star Canada.
That's great.
Okay. So first and foremost, we would like to start on a personal note. Okay. We would like to know, our viewers would like to know more about Richard Feehan, the person.
Okay. Well, I'm born and raised here in Edmonton, and I live on the south side with my wife, Kathleen, and we have 3 children, although my eldest 2 children have both moved to Vancouver now. So my son Antoine is married to Arit, and they have a grandchild, my first grandchild. They have a son, and I'm very thrilled about that. And my daughter just moved out there to finish her master's in library sciences and has decided to stay now because her husband has a job in computers. And the youngest one is still with us while he goes to school for a little while.
Okay. So let me ask a very quick question. In our Indian subcontinent saying, I will translate it for you.
Okay.
It says like father, like son, or like father, like daughter.
Right.
So any of those 3 children are interested in politics.
Well, everybody is interested in politics. I come from a very political family. My father also ran for politics in the province of Alberta many years ago in the late 60s. So my first campaign was when I was 7 years old, putting leaflets into mailboxes, and I've been in politics ever since. And all my kids participate in the campaigns when they're here in town. And they love it, but I don't think any of them are going to run. Not in the next little while.
I see. Talking about your father, so what did he represent, or any party, or in any level of the government he won?
Right. Well, in 1967 he ran for the Liberal Party, but he didn't make it, which I think he thinks was a good thing because it wasn't shortly after that he got put on the Queen's bench, so he was a judge for the last 30 some years of his life, and he really enjoyed that. It was the right place for him. He was a very intelligent man, but also very compassionate and had a good reputation on the bench.
I see. So he was a legal professional.
Yes, he was a lawyer, yes.
I'm very, very proud to know that your father was a judge.
I followed my mother a little bit more. Okay. My mother was a social worker, and I'm a social worker by training. 33 years as a social worker before I got elected, the last 11 as a professor of social work at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Social Work.
So your basic profession has been teaching, right?
Well, only most recently. My profession is social work overall, but I've been teaching social work with an area specialization in the area of family violence. That's what I did for most of my career, and then I taught at the university for the last while.
Okay, excellent. And your wife, what would you like to know about her?
Well, she's also a social worker. We met in grad school, as many people do. And she was the director of the School of Social Work at MacEwan University until recently. Her term is just up, and so she's just in transition right now, helping me a lot in my work now.
Excellent. And the kind of responsibilities you have, and you have taken up the load so much in the ministry too. So we would like to know, how do you juggle between those various hats?
Right.
Your MLA time as an MLA, and you have worked quite a bit as a minister, I know, and you're still working at this point, and your family life. So how do you manage your time?
Well, I guess one of the realities is that you just realize you're committing your whole life to doing the work, and that means that your day starts from the second you wake up until the time you go to sleep, and often the time you sleep is shorter than you'd like it to be. But my family understands that, and they participate as much as possible. My wife Kathleen, and sometimes my children, especially when they're around, come out to events with me and participate in the legal process. And I'm very careful to make sure I preserve some time every day to be with my family, and I also try to take some time, mostly on Sundays, to just hang with the family a little bit and be with them.
Excellent.
But lots of people work hard. It's not just politicians. If you're running a business, you have the same concern, and you always have to juggle these things back and forth. But my wife and I have been together for over 30 years, and we're pretty committed to each other, and so we find ways to make sure we maintain our marriage in a good way.
Excellent. So less time, but quality time for your family, right?
Yes, that's true. It is less time. A little bit more now that I'm no longer Minister of Indigenous Relations, because I traveled the province a lot, and so it is nice to be home almost every night. I only travel a little bit now.
Okay. So about your interests and passions in life, would you like to elaborate a little bit, tell our viewers about
that? Well, I obviously politics has kind of taken over my life a little bit now, but I'm very interested in the arts. I like to read, and I follow authors, and Kathleen and I go out to plays and movies and dance and music pretty regularly. That's what kind of sustains us when we've both been working really hard. Is the thing we really enjoy doing is going out and seeing some kind of artistic performance. So that's pretty high up in my life. In fact, my daughter, her first diploma was in arts management, or stage management, excuse me, and then she got a degree in it as well. So she's just recently gone to library sciences, but it's part of our family to always participate in the arts.
I see. And did you perform or played or sung in a
chorus? When I was a young man, I was in a number of plays, but it's been a long time since I did that kind of work.
Yeah, very good to know. You're still a young man.
Thank you, but
your age is what is in your head. How much you can take. As I was talking to you the other day, very quick reference, because Diwali is on, as you know,
yes.
And the greatest living personality, or the most well-known Indian personality now, his name is Amitabh Bachchan, and he is 76 years old, and he runs the most popular show, which has the copyrights from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Right.
It's called KBC. It's Kaun Banega Crorepati. So he is the icon, and when he talks, when he presents, the TRP, the rating of that show is the highest, and age is not a factor. Because he's 76.
No. Okay. I can tell you that even at my age, I keep hours that a lot of younger people aren't able to keep, and
absolutely,
just because it's engaging. The work that we're doing is really important, and I really have a deep respect for what Canada has achieved in the world. We've created a good place for people to live, and people come from all over. My family came from Ireland about 150, 160 years ago.
I see.
And people come. Somebody arrived just yesterday, and we've created a place for all of those people, and I think it's a pretty safe place. It's a good place to come and provide for your family, and to engage in the things that really give your life value, whether it's your religious community or your arts community or just your social community. It's a great place to be, Canada.
And Ireland is a wonderful place. I had the opportunity to be there, both the sides in Northern Ireland as well as the Republic of Ireland. It's beautiful.
Right.
And in today's Prime Minister, he is his ethnicity is half Indian.
That's right. That's right.
From Mumbai, his father was from Mumbai. And,
that's right.
That shows the diversity. Again, I think the culture resembles quite a bit with Canada. That's what I was telling my son that as he's thinking about going for overseas for a exchange program. I said England of course is certainly a great choice. Other than that, and he has been to England a few times because I was in England. But he said I told him that if you want to go a little bit different, where the cultures are similar to Canada, it is Ireland, and it's a beautiful place.
Well, both my two oldest children, after they graduated from grade 12, before they went off to university, they both moved to Ireland for a while, and then raised enough money, working jobs in various places, and so that they could then travel all of Europe. And so it was a really good way for them to take a break between grade 12 and going to university, and now they're both better world travelers than I am. They've been in more countries than I have.
Well, very good to know.
Yeah.
So since we talked about Ireland, because we will come to the main issues here in a bit, but we are still trying to unfold and get to explore more about each other. So because of your Irish background also, and you are so much well versed in the world politics too, a very quick comment on the Brexit, and especially in particular that hard border, the negotiation which is happening. So what is your take on it?
It is one of those extremely complex political problems that may not be well resolved by the government. It may have to be other people that have to come forward. The issue in Ireland is that, of course, we have Northern Ireland, which is considered part of the United Kingdom, and the Southern Ireland, which is not. And if they have Brexit, what's going to happen, of course, is that suddenly there's going to be a barrier put between those two that doesn't exist right now. Now, the problem is that that's not just simply an issue of two nations. It's an issue of a long history of troubles in Ireland between what they see as the English sort of colonialization of Northern Ireland. And so the people in Southern Ireland feel like all of Ireland should be a single country, but we have this history of the British being there. And in fact, my family comes from both sides of that dispute, by the way. My mother's side of the family, the Hammond side of the family, were all Northern Irish people, and my father's side of the family were all Southern Irish people. So it's going to be a dramatic problem, and I really hope that Britain respects the fact that Ireland has desires to engage North and South in a way that may not be true on other borders with other countries.
So you're not seeing any quick resolution at this point?
No, I can't see that happening very, very quickly. But I also hope that it does not lead to more real strife. I mean, the history in Ireland has not been good.
I know.
It's one of those places in the world where there's been violent strife, and not something I'm happy about at all, and I certainly don't want that provoked again.
Yeah, I remember we were taken for a MBA tour to Northern Ireland, part of it, to Belfast, and the director of MBA was showing us a hotel which was almost opposite to our hotel, and he said, this is the most bombed hotel in the history of the world. So we were, of course, you're taken aback for a bit. Well, that's a great culture. So when you mentioned that other people may have to step in, not just the government, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think government plays a very important role in society, but I don't think it's the only way that we make our society better. That civil institutions are very important. So, the community groups that develop, whether they're political community groups with a political advocacy point of view, or whether they're social groups, people who have a shared religion or a shared ethnicity, or just a shared community, a geography, getting together and beginning to define what it is that they want. In Ireland, if they really stick to, let's not worry about the political solution. Let's look at how we maintain good relationships across the border of Northern to Southern Ireland. Then I think you'll start to see a lot of flow. There'll be people crossing the border on a regular basis. They won't worry about whether or not it's an international division or not, and they will communicate with each other. And if they start to do that, then what happens is they begin to create a culture that the government begins to understand and respect. I think that's true everywhere. I think that's true here as well. If you wait for the government to make all the decisions, you're going to wait a long time. What you need to do is you need to get society to be moving forward, to be expressing itself. And then what happens, governments tend to recognize what is already happening in the community. And I I think that's important. I've heard it said that governments really like a parade. They like to get in front and pretend that they started it.
Yeah.
And that means that people in society need to be in the parade. How do you want your country to be? Who do you want to be able to communicate with? And how do you want to build community? If you do all of that, and then you invite me in as a politician, I learn from you, and I watch to see how it develops, and then I find ways to enhance it and support it when I go back into the legislature.
And that is the very essence of democracy.
I think so. That's right.
Excellent. Mr. Richard Feehan, now we will come to the burning issue, which is the budget.
Right.
And thank you for inviting me. And I represented Star Canada and also Ethnic Synergy yesterday. And
great
as
to
your
have
guest,
you there.
fantastic. So it was a great ambience. This was my second opportunity to be at the budget.
Oh, good.
But I don't want to say any comments because we want to hear from you. Our listeners and viewers would like to listen and know what is your take on the budget.
Well, I think I'm very disappointed to see what they've done. They have created a crisis and then have pretended to put in a budget to solve the crisis that they really created. Now, I know they blame the previous government for increasing debt, but the reality is if you look at their budget, their debt path is exactly the same as the debt path of the previous government. They haven't changed that. In fact, what they've done is they've reduced revenues dramatically. First of all, they gave a big tax cut away to corporations. That was going to put about a $4.5 billion hole in the provincial budget. And they told us that the reason why they're doing that is because they're hoping to create jobs. But we provided evidence to them. For example, I went to the American Congressional Budget Office. This is a very respected institution in the United States. To demonstrate when you give tax breaks to large corporations, they don't create more jobs. What they do is they give dividends to their own shareholders and, of course, increase CEO salaries. And that's exactly what's happened here in the province of Alberta. In fact, since they've done that tax break, we have decreased 27,000 jobs, most of them in oil and gas. So the very industry that they said that they were trying to help has actually lost ground because, the companies don't make decisions to expand the number of jobs just because they have more money. They only make decisions whether or not they have a buyer for a product. You don't say, I have $100, should I hire a new staff person? You say, can I sell something more? And if I can, then I will hire a staff person to do that. So it's actually the consumer, the people that promise to buy or that do buy, in fact, that actually creates jobs. It's not the big businesses that do that.
So that's a good logic, one perspective. The other perspective is what was told yesterday by the finance minister, that the tax structure is better than most of the provinces in Canada and about 40 states in US. So it is among the best in the entire North America. What it will do is that at least it will draw a lot of investment. And there wasn't an example given, but one recent example is certainly Amazon. So companies like Amazon and many other tech companies probably would start making some kind of a office.
But I want to remind you that both Google and Amazon set up shop here in Alberta under our previous government, not after this budget. Those things had already happened. They were out to cutting the ribbon on Cavendish Farms, but that investment was actually made under our government. They're saying that there's going to be more investment, but I want to remind people there was lots of investment in Alberta prior to this budget. It wasn't in oil and gas, but that was also true in Saskatchewan that had an austerity budget 3 years ago, and they cut back. They also lost investment because it had nothing to do with the government's choices. It had to do with the world price of oil. And I think it's really important that we remember that we can have the lowest taxes, as you said, anywhere in Canada, and we do. But that creates a deficit in terms of our revenues. And that's why we have a deficit today. If we were to take the same tax regime here in Alberta to have in any other province, you pick the province, let's say Saskatchewan or BC, which are the closest ones to us, we would raise $11 billion more a year in this province and we would have zero debt. So it's simply a choice by this government to have debt by not raising taxes to a normal standard rate across the country. And that's really unacceptable. And not only that, they have taken more actions to create more troubles for us. They canceled, for example, the oil by rail, which was predicted to bring in $2.5 billion worth of revenue into this province, and they had gotten rid of that.
And that was a pre-election kind of a declaration that if we come to power, it will not be flowing through anyway.
That's right.
Very quickly, to be asked, when you said the spending pattern is almost the same, which also I read that, then how is it an austerity budget then? I mean, both doesn't go hand in hand, right?
Sure it does, because what they've done is they have done an austerity budget and they have cut down the amount of revenues they've had, which has resulted in the same amount of debt in the end. So they've taken away the services in order to fund the monies they've given away. Now, Graham Thompson in the Edmonton Journal suggests that works out to the amount of money that they have given away in this budget is over $20 billion worth over the next 4 years. And so they have created the problem, and then they pretend that they have to do all these cuts in order to deal with the problem that they've been handed. That's not true. These cuts are decisions to take things away from people who need them. And it always is shocking to me that they go after the most vulnerable people. For example, we have citizens of Alberta who are unable to work because they have physical disabilities or other disabilities, and they're on the AISH program. Well, we made a decision after looking at it for a few years that one of the best things to do would be to index their income. They only get $1,600 a month, so it's not a lot of money. And so we said, well, every year we'll just increase that by the amount of inflation. They took that away. So that means that people living on the lowest amount of income in this province are now paying for major corporations to get extra money for them. The other thing that they did not announce before this budget that I think is very important, everybody should remember, is they also de-indexed the tax brackets. So every year, normally, the tax brackets slide up a little bit so that you're always protected, that the tax bracket move a little higher so that as you go up, you don't immediately jump into the next tax bracket. They de-index that. So they're not going to move the tax bracket up. So that means a lot of people are going to suddenly find they're paying more taxes next year than they would have this year. And the total is about $600 million that they're actually charging. So in reality, income taxes went up in this budget.
Even property taxes is expected?
Well, yes. Both the mayors have told us that's going to increase property taxes because they've also increased the provincial government's portion of your city tax is the education tax. And they've increased the education tax. So the tax bill you get from the city of Calgary or the city of Edmonton is actually, city of Red Deer, Lethbridge, Grand Prairie, is going to look higher, and people will start to blame the city, but it's not the city, it's the province that's actually raised that.
What about the research and innovation now?
Well, we were very disappointed that we had developed these tax programs for research and innovation that were going to really enhance our high-tech industries, which is part of our package that we use to attract Google and Amazon and other companies here. And we had worked very closely with an Edmonton-based computer game company here as well, BioWare, to develop a strategy that will help them to hire more people and to expand here in Edmonton. And this government has decided to take away all of that kind of innovation dollars. So they're really betting that oil and gas is coming back because they put 100% of their eggs in that basket. And it's been very disappointing. The film industry lost money yesterday. High-tech industry lost money yesterday. Educational institutions lost money yesterday, and I think that's going to be very devastating for our future economy that is not going to depend on oil and gas in the same way.
Talking about the mayors, you said, so one recent example which I experienced was I covered the event where Prime Minister had flown into Edmonton, and there was some direct funding given to the city, and province was not involved or not even invited at all. It happened in the Shaw Conference Center about a couple of months, 3 months ago. So do you think that's the way to go? Because what's happening is that the federal government bypasses the provincial government completely and gives funding to the city government.
Well, that's possible, but it's sort of ironic, isn't it, that a conservative government is now going to depend on a federal liberal government in order to save our cities because they're not prepared to do it themselves. That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? If I were in the federal arena, I would probably try to advocate for that because I would like to see Edmonton, Calgary, Lethbridge, Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray all grow. And so I would certainly be wanting to support the federal government if they were to make that decision to go directly to the cities. One of the big things that did happen to the cities in this budget is that they had been explicitly promised in the platform during the election that the big cities charter would be respected. But in fact, they canceled the proposed big city charter program, and they apparently are introducing a new bill early next week that will actually remove the bill that supported the big cities charter. So they made a specific promise to help big cities, and now they've taken that away, which is why Mayor Don Iveson had to cancel his trip to Europe yesterday and come back and sit down with the City of Edmonton councillors and begin to plot out which major infrastructure projects are we about to have to delay or remove completely. So if you were looking for support around the Terwilliger bypass, for example, that's probably gone. The new South Edmonton Hospital, that's probably gone.
3 years delayed at least.
Oh, at least, yeah. We're probably talking a decade.
And LRT?
Well, and again, the LRT. I know in Calgary they're very worried about the Green Line being gone now. In Edmonton, of course, we have the Valley Line, and it plans to expand beyond that. All of that's in jeopardy now because this government simply decided they were going to reduce the amount of monies they had available to them, as Graham Thompson says from the Journal, by a rate of over $20 billion.
So one of our viewers asked me, especially listening to the Liberals and NDPs during the federal campaign. She asked me, is the balanced budget thing of the past? Now, yesterday's budget announcement, at least, she starts to feel that balanced budget is around the corner. So your comment on that, and the second part of the same question is, when it was told yesterday that the province will balance its budget in 4 years, are we talking about 4 years from the month of April when the election happened, or 4 years from the day the budget was announced? In that case, it would require another term because it is right. 3.5 years left. So when, I'm not really asking you to read into what the finance minister said, but the perception, 4 years means what? The next term, 6 months is the next term, or within the next term before you're going to ask for re-election again?
Well, you had to remember that the NDP also had a path to balance, and we had set that path out right from the beginning. We said, we know we're going to go into debt right now, but it's an important time. A lot of people have lost their jobs. 100,000 people lost their jobs. And we needed to keep stimulating the economy so it wouldn't turn into 200,000 people. And we set a path to balance that said, look, we understand we're going into debt, but here's how we're going to get out of it. Not only did we meet our path to balance, but we exceeded that path to balance every year in the 4 years that we were in. So in the last year, for example, 2018, we actually came in $2 billion less than we originally had in our path to balance. If you look at the Conservative path to balance and our path to balance, they're almost identical. They come out approximately the same time at approximately the same amount of debt. There's some variation, I get that, maybe a small bit of variation, but really the paths are not that different. The difference was that we were providing services to people of Alberta while we were doing it, and they're not providing services to people of Alberta. They're giving money away to corporations. So whereas you used to be able to see money going to your kid's school under our budget, now that money's gone to pay for somebody's swimming pool in Texas.
Okay. So I know you're not an economic forecaster, but you have got a lot of experience to foresee. Do you think in 3.5 years' time, when there would be another provincial election, there would be a balanced budget before that?
I would think it would be hard-pressed to actually have a balanced budget on that particular day. But the path is for approximately around the time of the next election. Both the NDP path, as we originally had it set out, and of course the UCP path have us arrive at that at about the same time. One thing I want to remind you is the NDP, of all the parties across Canada, if you look at all the budgets that have been put in, is the party that have had the most balanced budgets of any party. You can look that up on the internet if you don't believe me. That we do believe in having a balanced budget when we can do that. But there are times when you don't do that. Just like in a family, sometimes you have to spend some money in order to make some money. And when the economy goes down, the cycle goes down, it's a good idea for government to spend money. Well, businesses can't because business has gone away. Oil and gas was devastated by the price of oil. They had no money in order to invest in the economy. So we invested the money in the economy. That caused our debt. But we understand that you only do that temporarily, and that's why we set the path back down to balance again. And we have a good record of that at the NDP. Yes, we do create deficits at times, but we also reduce them at other times.
And I think the major factor in all the extrapolation and forecast about balancing the budget is going to be the oil prices, right?
Well, if you depend only on oil, you have to wait for that. And it looks like the Conservatives have decided the only way forward is to hope that oil and gas is coming back in the same way that it was before. So if you believe that somehow we're going to get to $110 a barrel in oil, then you're probably betting on the right Conservative horse. If you think that that's not going to happen, then you should probably think that this Conservative government should stop setting their budget on just oil and gas and look at other things like high tech or even farming or something else so that we can increase our manufacturing, that we can increase our secondary food industries, and that we can help to create an economy like it is in other parts of the world that don't have the privilege of having great amounts of bitumen under the soil.
So now the position of provincial NDP here in Alberta is very progressive, but it is not the same kind of thinking they have, which is the federal NDP or even the BC NDP. So where do you think will be your party's role in trying to bring everyone together?
Well, one of the things that's really important to realize is that people have a right to their individual opinions about things. That's the very nature of democracy. If we all had exactly the same opinion across the country, that would be undemocratic.
I would like to only add here, this is very well said if there are different parties, but if it is the same brand of New Democrats, having different opinions is again, you're not pulling the string in the same direction.
Sure, I mean, there's going to be some variance, but we all are moving in the same direction. All the party, whether it happens to be in BC or Manitoba or federally, all believe that government has a very important role in order to establish the structures of society that benefit everybody. So when it comes to things like public health care, well, the NDP are the people that brought that because we believe that's true. Doesn't matter how much money you have, where you live in the country, you should have access to that. We believe in public education, that you should be able to go to the school down the street, not pay thousands of dollars to a private institution, but you should be able to go to the school down the street and get a good enough education that will lead you on to whatever further education you want or whatever further job you want, whether that means you want to get training to become an electrician, you want to go to the law school, or you want to go to medicine, or any of the thousands of other jobs that are available. Your grounding should be in good, positive public education institutions. That's what ties all the NDP together, the belief that we can actually build a good society by building good structures. And the example I gave the other day to someone in the house, in fact it was that everybody needs water at their house. Now, if we went around and said to everybody, you drill your own well, and every house in the city of Edmonton had their own well, most of us would see that as ridiculous. That's a poor way to solve that problem. Instead, what we do is we build a water system that goes around the whole city, supplying to everyone. Doesn't matter whether you live in the richest area of town or the poorest area of town. You can turn that tap and have decent, healthy drinking water. Sure. And we've done that because we built the structures to do that. We didn't depend on individuals to solve their own water problem. And that's the philosophy of the NDP. We always look, what are the structures that will help everybody at the same time? Healthcare does that. Education does that. Water systems do that. But the Conservatives want to go the other way. They want to go to the direction of, no, we should let free enterprise do it. Let people go out and set up businesses to drill individual water wells in every single household in the city of Edmonton. It's a metaphor. I mean, they're not actually
Well said,
doing that.
well said. So before we go to our final round, which is the buzzer round, I've got one last question. We talked about the NDPs across the provinces and the federal. Now the next challenge which is there is that your team is so strong in Edmonton. What are you doing to, grow further into the rural area, especially in the Calgary belt, so that your message is heard and you get some, higher representation in terms of numbers in the August assembly from more Calgarians, more rural people. So what has been your team's strategy towards it?
Well, clearly we have work to do. There's no question. But I want to remind you, though, we actually got more votes in this election that we lost the government than we did in the election we won the government. And that's just the nature of democracy.
Popular votes, you want to say?
More popular vote.
Right.
The more actual number of votes.
Okay.
So our base has changed. The number of people who see themselves as NDPers and want to vote us in has risen to the highest level in history. And we understand that means we also need to branch out to the other people who didn't vote for us. And we need to talk to them. It was a very difficult time. Governments are always blamed for bad economic times. And we happened to be given government at a time that was horrible, And so, of course, we had a much harder job to do in the election than the Conservatives did. And we know that means we also have to think in future about how do we reach out to people who didn't vote for us and say to them, tell us what it is that you'd like to see your government do. Help us understand as much as possible about what good governance is from your perspective, and we will begin to institute that. So we've spent a lot of time beginning our process of going around the province. We've been on a number of tours around the province already, talking to people. We did a post-election tour where we went around talking to people about what happened and what they'd like to see changed. I know I participated in some of those. And we have some of our ministers going around. I, myself, as the former Minister of Indigenous Relations, have been in constant contact with First Nations and Métis communities around the province, asking them, what is it that they'd like to see different? How do we understand better what it is that you want from your government? And we'll follow that up.
I missed to ask you for another very important part of your contribution to the caucus. So what is your role as a critic or the responsibility within the House?
Right. So my role in the House is to be the critic for Indigenous relations. So the same job that I had when I was actually the minister, my job now is to critique the minister in the House. And I take that job very seriously. I was the first and only Minister of Indigenous Relations that actually visited all of the communities, 100% of them. 48 First Nations, 8 Métis settlements, and many other Métis communities throughout the province and in First Nations communities around the province of Alberta. And I did that because I really believe a job of government is to listen to people. And you can't listen to people sitting down in the tower downtown. So I went out to all of those communities and talked to them and said, tell me what it is that we need to be doing to make things better. How do we work together to improve the lives for everybody? And my job stays the same now that I'm no longer the minister. I still need to talk to all those same people. And because I actually went out into the community and talked to them, I actually know people. They aren't mysterious to me. I can pick up the phone and say, hi, how are you doing? It's been a little while since I've been out to see you, but I'd like to know a little bit more about what it is that needs to happen. And I can tell you, I'm certainly getting a lot of feedback after this budget because they devastated the Indigenous community. If you look at the budget, it looks like it's about a 19% cut, but it's actually not, because half of the Indigenous relations budget is just flow-through money. It's not really government money. It comes from the First Nations casinos and goes to the First Nations community. And we're just the bank in between. So if you actually look at the actual services provided to Indigenous communities in this province, it's about a 36% cut.
Okay, Richard Feehan, thank you very much for answering, two parts of our interview. The last part, which we have been given a feedback by our valuable listeners and the persons who are watching us over the TV and the other social media platform, that the buzzer round is interesting, whereby
looking forward to it.
the guest is not prepared, he's thrown a word and you will have it. So can we start the buzzer round?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, balanced budget.
Well, I think it's got to be done at the right time for the right reasons and not just simply because you believe in the balanced budgets by itself.
job creation vis-a-vis yesterday's budget?
Well, yesterday's budget is not a job creation budget. It's a reduction in services budget. That's all it's about. Since this government has got into power, they've lost 27,000 jobs, most of them in the oil and gas. And that's the problem, that they don't understand about how to develop the future economy in this province, which is going to depend on high-tech, arts and tourism, and manufacturing and food and so on, not just on oil and gas. Oil and gas will always be a significant part, but you can't put all of your eggs in one basket.
Okay. So Greta Thunberg's climate activists visit to Edmonton and Jasper National Park.
Well, the important thing about something like Greta Thunberg coming to Edmonton is not that we adopt whatever it is she's specifically saying, but that it invites all of us to look at what the problem is here. In our party, we believe climate change is a real problem, that it is man-made, and that we have a responsibility to resolve that problem. And there are things we can do to resolve that problem. And that means we need to all participate in reducing the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. I went to that protest and talked to lots of people, and some of them, have ideas that I would never even consider because they would just hurt everybody too much. But certainly within that large crowd of 10,000 people, there were lots of people who had very good ideas about how do we take care of the earth. I mean, there are islands in the South Asian area that are about to disappear off the face of the earth because the water is rising, and if we continue to allow that to happen, it is going to cause devastation and cause more and more people to have to become refugees in this world, and that we know that that's not a very satisfactory place for people to be.
So federal government and I believe BC government, they provide subsidies for electric vehicles. Alberta government is not yet providing. What do you think should be done?
Well, subsidies may or may not be the right solution. I certainly think that we should be moving more toward electric vehicles, and the government should be enhancing the likelihood of that by finding ways to do that. But there are a variety of ways to do it. I mean, government's role may be to provide infrastructure so that there are electric charging stations all around the province. Or it may be that we provide a direct subsidy, or we just find some other mechanism through taxation or somewhere else where we make sure that happens. We have to remember there isn't just one tool in our toolbox to handle any problem. We have to look at a variety of tools. And if we can get people interested in electric vehicles, I think that would be a really positive thing.
Okay. And so the mechanism of change or phasing out fossil fuel with the timeline, for example, Ms. May has said within 10 years. So what is your take on it?
I think it's a mistake to sort of pick an arbitrary date and say we're going to phase it out this date. What we have to do is we have to look at the real problem. The real problem is carbon in the atmosphere. And we know that it's the man-made introduction of carbon into the atmosphere that's caused the problem. Of course, carbon is natural. It's how much is in the atmosphere and how much is being put out at any one day. That's what we have to tackle. So I don't want to set a date that says we're going to, get off fossil fuels 10 years down the road. I don't think that's going to happen. What I want us to do is say, okay, we have a mission. Our mission is to clean up the atmosphere, provide a healthier environment for all of our people, and to prevent the destruction that's going to come from rising water levels and worsened hurricanes and so on. And because it's serious, because it's very threatening to a lot of people, that we need to get on it very seriously, and we need to take specific action today. So rather than projecting into the future, I want to talk about what do we do today? What do we do today in that budget that will actually reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere? And the answer is nothing. They did absolutely nothing. They eliminated the whole climate leadership plan. And that had done wonderful things in this province. That had more than quadrupled the amount of wind in this province. It had put solar panels up all across the province. I can tell you this, even in my climate leadership plan at the Indigenous Relations, we had over 30 communities, First Nations and Métis communities, put up solar panels in the 3 years that program was in effect. We were really headed in a very strong direction, and we were actually seeing some effects in decreasing carbon. That's all gone now.
Carbon tax.
Well, carbon taxes are an important way of getting the economy to help us to move on the moral imperative of taking care of the environment. You've got to remember, it was the Conservatives who originally proposed the original carbon taxes, because they said, what you should do, you should put a price on pollution and then let the natural marketplace begin to use its strength to cause a change in behavior. And that's why it was called the carbon levy, because it's not intended for the money to come in. It didn't go in our case, didn't go into government coffers just for general revenue. It only went into other green environment projects. So it's called the carbon levy because its focus is on changing people's behaviors, just using market forces. Originally, it was proposed by Prime Minister Harper, but then suddenly the Conservatives decided that they really didn't care enough about the environment, and that there are enough people who didn't want to pay an extra tax that they were able to use it. So they abandoned their principles and they moved to the other side. I think carbon levies are important, and I got to tell you, in the federal election that happened on Monday, 2/3 of Canadians, almost 70% in fact, of Canadians voted for a party that is in favor of carbon levy.
Paris Climate Accord.
Well, those kind of accords are very important in terms of people getting together to talk about what they're going to do. I get very worried when we get stuck on some number that came out of the Paris Climate Accord as if that's the issue. As I just mentioned before, the issue is, are we doing something to resolve the problem? Are we active in actually taking responsibility for our own world and making sure that we have a world to pass on to our children? So I think it's great that we have the Paris Climate Accord and other ones, Rio or other places around the world where we've met to have those conversations. But no matter what happens at those meetings, I want to know, what did we do in Alberta to clean up the environment for our kids and the people who live here now? And that budget, the answer is nothing.
Okay, the final one, 3 parts. Relationship of Alberta with US, China and India.
Well, I think it's very important that Canada continue to have strong relationships around the world. We have the largest democracy in the world in India. And what we want, from a Canadian perspective, is for them to be a successful democracy. Because if they're a successful democracy, then we have democracy in more places in the world than we don't have democracy. And that's positive. And so I would think that Alberta and Canada need to spend a lot of time working with India, because together we can build a very strong economy. Right now, I'm very concerned about our relationship with the United States, because their intentions are confused right now. And I'm not sure that their desire for the ultimate good of all peoples is very high up on their agenda. And that's problematic for all of us. So it means that those of us who have had our primary relationship with the United States in the past are probably better off to look around the world at other people who are a little bit more like-minded and are going to support us, so that we can be a bit more diversified. And I think India is an absolute excellent place to go for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard Feehan. Thank you for being with us.
I really
Thank you all the viewers of Star Canada TV for watching our program. Our guest today was MLA Richard Feehan from Edmonton Rutherford, and we would like to wish everyone, all the families watching here, a very happy Diwali. Thank you.
Thank you.